welcome to this week's episode of Fridays at First, and we're changing it up on them a little bit today because I did not preach this Sunday, so I didn't feel quite right. Brett preached. Oh, he preached, by the way, so he preached this Sunday. Him preaching and asking the questions, so I am now the facilitator today. So
it's going to throw me off, I feel like.
It's really weird.
It is weird.
It's weird. So
it'll be good, though. It'll be good.
We'll figure it out. Well, I don't know if I'm a good question asker, so we'll figure it out today. So this week we looked at a sermon entitled "What's Life All About," and it was our grad recognition Sunday. So being our youth pastor, you preached for us this week, and so let's just kind of dive into that initial question. What is life all about was the title. So tell us, what is life all about?
Yeah, I think this is such an important question. And I think it's a question that every person needs to ask. And even if you ignore asking the question, like you're still accountable to it because you're still living. We're all living. And whether we ignore the rules of life or live by them, we're still living life. We're still playing that game. And so we all should ask this question. And it'd be better, that's why I kind of encourage our graduates, it's better to ask that question sooner rather than later so that you're not just living life pointlessly or without direction, but you're living for a real direction and purpose. So what life is all about, we talked about this yesterday of this idea that when Jesus answers this question of what is the greatest command, he says the greatest commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind or strength. And then the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And both of these commandments are what life is all about. What God calls us to live is to completely love Him completely and fully in every aspect of our lives, as well as love people completely and fully. And one aspect I got at with this, and what I really think Jesus is telling us, is that, we can't do one without the other. If we love God, but then we don't love people and care for our neighbor and even the people we don't like, then we fail to love God and let that love flow out of us. And the same thing is true. We can't just love people and ignore God because that's not actually loving people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I like how you kind of differentiated that, or maybe not differentiated, but highlighted that, we're all alive. So the sooner we figure out the purpose of life, and you said it in your message yesterday that even if you're 100, you still have your whole life ahead of you. So no matter where you are, if you're 5 or if you're 50 or if you're 75, you have your whole life ahead of you now, whether that's another 50 years or another 5 years. So the sooner you can learn the purpose of your existence, the more of our life we're going to have to live that purpose. And so it was a great challenge to our grads that, man, at 18, if you can remember and be committed to what your purpose is, you literally have your whole life ahead of you, Lord willing, to live that purpose. And so one question I'd like to ask is, it was a message for everybody, no matter what walk of life, but it was targeted a little bit to the graduates and those younger adults or youth that are coming up. And so why do you think young people, especially young people, struggle so much with this question, what is life all about? Like, why do you think in our world, in our culture, that why are we so confused as to the purpose of what life is all about?
Yeah. Well, I think, and especially, you're so right, young people are confused about what life is, what the purpose of life is, and you can just see this in what they put their hopes and dreams in and how they shape what they shape their lives around. And I think the reason that they're so confused and there's so much confusion related to this is because we live in a world that is also confused. We live in a world especially in our world today, with a kind of this postmodern mindset that purpose is something you find in your deepest desires, in your heart, or something else, not something that's given to you or something that you were made for. It's more of, just do what makes you happy. That's one of the biggest driving forces of what people live for. And just like we talked about, that's a fading purpose. And then that's why you see people so confused, because then, what happens if they can't get, they can't do the thing that makes them happy? If there's something that prevents them, well, then their whole life is bound up in that. Or on the other end of it, maybe they get what makes them happy, and then they realize, this is life. This is what I've made my life into. And I think you've talked about it before in sermons, and we've talked about it of you see that a lot in Hollywood too, of There are people who literally get to the point where they have everything.
Everything.
They have everything they could ever ask for or want, and then their life feels pointless.
Yeah, and I think it's exactly the struggle we live in. And I would say it's not just solely different in our culture than it has been in, I mean, I think for the history of the world, people have been confused about their purpose. I mean, that's why, it's always been an issue with people living for, that immediate gratification, all that, because the devil's the author of confusion. Like you said, we are a confused society. I mean, I saw a post this week by Shane Pruitt that talked about how we are confused about everything in this world, like from morality to gender to and he's like, who's the author of confusion? Well, the author of confusion is Satan. I heard it on a podcast one time where the guy said that we complicate our purpose, meaning that we sometimes think our purpose, we kind of put it too much under a microscope where my purpose is to be a vet, or my purpose is to be a lawyer, my purpose is to be a farmer or a nurse or a teacher. But that might be something you're called to do and you're gifted to do. But your purpose is to love God and love people. Now, if your avenue is going to be through a vet or a law or teacher, that might be okay. But if that doesn't work out, you can still fulfill your purpose. So our purpose, and if you're watching this, young person, remember that. Don't put that that big of a microscope over your purpose. Your purpose might not necessarily be to be a lawyer, to be a doctor, to be an athlete. Your purpose is to love God and love people, and you can do that whatever walk of life you're in. And that's why I think we get so much confusion and depression and something, because like, well, I want to be this, and then it doesn't work out, and they feel like their whole life is, or they are that career for several years, and then for something happens, they lose that career, and they question their purpose because they're putting their purpose in their job or their title or their position instead of in their creator.
Yeah, there's so many good things about what you're just talking about. I think one concept you just got into that we talked about in the sermon is this idea that we're not saying, oh, quit your normal job and go be a full-time ministry person where you're a preacher or a missionary. That's not what Jesus' call is here. I think this is more encompassing than that. Like there will be people that God calls to full-time ministry.
Absolutely.
There will be people who God calls courageously to missionary work, but God calls all of his people in a whole bunch of different areas with a whole bunch of different gifts. And yeah, so don't feel like you just have to have a ministry-related job. This is any job. And then the other thing that you maybe think about with the careers, I think if we take an honest look at ourselves, we do seek purpose. There's something inside of us that seeks purpose. But I think one reason why people are putting too much purpose into their jobs and careers, as in a big movement right now is, you need to make sure that you're at a job or career that is fulfilling. That's where you get your purpose from. And I think we are doing that, and we're shifting and putting our purpose in our job or career, having a job that's fulfilling, is because we have failed to put our purpose in God and failed to put in what he calls us to do. We've put it in these other things. And so I also want to encourage those of you who you're just working a 9-to-5 job. It's not like, the job that you were gifted at or made for, but you are just providing for your family. There's nothing wrong with that either. And if you put too much emphasis on purpose in your career, then you're also telling everybody else, hey, well, you're not really living for your purpose, even though so many people for all of life have lived normal jobs and glorified God and actually lived out their purpose more so than maybe some jobs that seem more fulfilling.
Well, everything, absolutely. And we could talk about this point for a long time, because what the essence of that podcast was like back for almost, 5,000 years or more, probably more than that, just about a couple hundred years ago of human history. Your purpose was, I need to provide for my family. Like, however that looks like, I need to love God and love people. But, I mean, there wasn't the plethora of options of our careers and all that. That's relatively new. And so for history, people's purpose was loving their family and serving God. And we need to get back to that. Now, thank God we do have that abundance of opportunity in those jobs, those careers. But anything, and you said in the sermon, I say anything we put our purpose in, anything we think is going to fulfill us apart from God is going to leave us empty, because everything in this world will be taken from us. And I view it as a pastor, and you've said it, I think, on this podcast, that we need to constantly view ourselves as what do you say, as temporary, because no matter if you're going to pastor, no matter if you pastor, you serve a church for 50 years, you're still only there for a season. So how do you remember how you worded that? Yeah,
I heard it from a youth ministry book. What was it? I'm trying to think. Yeah. I'll let you know if I come back to it.
If it comes back, let me know. But that's just, remember that even if you're in your career and you're going to be there for another 40 years, you eventually will not have that career anymore. And if that's your purpose, when you retire at 65, 70, 75, you're going to be wondering, well, what's my purpose now? But your purpose and you're living for Jesus and loving others never change. All right, let's move on. Yeah. But we kind of maybe have touched on this a little bit in some of what we said, but let's kind of put it all together. Like, what are some common lies that the world tells graduates or young people or people altogether about what will give them a meaningful or purposeful life?
Yeah, so we talked about some already. We talked about, I think career's a big one right now. Of just find a career that will fulfill you. We talked about another one already of just do what makes you happy, and that doesn't fulfill, and that's not a good purpose to put your purpose in. I think another one, and this is maybe just because I deal with so many teenagers and they're in and out of love all the time, dating relationships, and I think that's another big one is, trying to find your purpose in that spouse or that dating relationship, trying to find your purpose in there, and just like you already said, people were not made to be your God. And I think we mentioned this recently, but I'll never forget a pastor talking about this same topic and said, I love my wife, I'm grateful for my wife, she's a blessing from God, but when my wife dies, I have to make sure I'm not burying my God. They are not supposed to be the end-all, be-all of our lives. We have to love them, care for them. And that's part of what we like.
And when you love God, you'll actually love your spouse more.
Yes.
And because He gives you a deeper love for. But I think it's a wonderful thing to draw out that the culture of relationships are going to be your fulfillment, because we watch shows now where 14-year-olds and the shows are all about boyfriends and girlfriends and dating, and I mean it's just, I think the young culture especially thinks that fulfillment's going to be in when they find that significant other or a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and that's a dangerous place to be. But I would say one more that might be a little different, but it's this culture of you might call it the influencer culture. You might call it the retiring at 30s culture. Like right now, kind of the fad that's coming up on the scene is, man, you don't need to retire at 65. You need to invest and do things so you can, live from 30 to 65 doing whatever you want. And we sometimes think that fulfillment will be if we could financially make it, where we could just travel the world. And I mean, that's a very small amount of people who do this, by the way, but the influence culture makes it seem like it's a lot of people, and we think, well, if I just didn't have to work or I just didn't have to stress about bills, then I would be fulfilled and I would be happy, and it's not that case. And one more thing about that is our culture tends to tell us a lie that, and you referenced it, do what makes you happy. You are your God. You need to find your purpose. Well, that's the worst advice you give, because until you're living for God and serving other people, you're never, the most miserable people I've met have been some of the most selfish people I've met. Living for yourself, doing what you want to do, how you want to do it, putting you above everything else only leads to misery every single time. Serving leads to joy.
And so with that, that's a twofold problem, because not only is putting our purpose in ourselves or doing what we want to do destructive for ourselves. Ultimately, it's going to fail us. It's not going to fulfill us, because only God can fulfill us. But then there's a second side of that of, man, how terrible of a framework for society. If everyone is just selfish and just does what they want to do. Because then you run into a clear problem. This isn't exaggerated, but it's a real thing of, what do you do when someone's purpose or what makes them happy hurts you or other people around you? And then you're running into conflict even there. So not only is it bad for us on an individual scale, but whenever we put our purpose in these false purposes, these fake purposes, it destroys our society as a whole as well.
Absolutely. And so the culture is pretty much trying to tell you lies that your purpose is anywhere but God. That's kind of what
Yes.
it's trying. It doesn't care. Devil's the God of this world, right? He's the prince of power of this earth, and we talked about that last week. But he doesn't care what you put your purpose in. He's just trying to keep you from seeing. The world wants to keep you from seeing that your only fulfillment is in living, honoring God and loving people, loving God and loving people. And that when that truly becomes your purpose, you will be content and you will be satisfied and you'll be fulfilled no matter what your circumstances are. Paul says, Philippians 4, whether I was rich or poor, whatever, I've learned to be content. And that's the verse in Philippians 4:13. We often put on sports shirts and everything, which says I can do all things through Christ. And I understand why they do that, but the technical context of that verse is he can be content in all things because of Christ who gives him strength. And so, so what you made a reference in your message about how, loving God and loving people is not just something we have to determine to try harder at or to do better at. It's something that we can only do with the power of Christ, the Spirit of God within us. He gives us, so kind of expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's one thing to know our purpose. It's one thing to know that we are made for God, made to reflect Him, and made to show that love to everybody else. It's one thing to know that. It's another thing to do it. And if we just sit here and just try to love God completely and fully and try to love people completely and fully on our own strength and our own energy, then we are going to fall and fail short 100 times. And one of the examples I used is think about it like this, of what makes us human is that call to live as completely and fully loving God and completely and fully loving people. That's what it is supposed to mean, that we are fully human. But the thing is, just like it goes back all the way to the garden, of we were made in the image of God, but we have chosen and we have failed to reflect God. We are not that perfect image. We don't perfectly reflect God and His love and do that. We said, all these other things, we reflect ourselves, we reflect other gods, we reflect other purposes, and we are broken images. And so no matter what you do with a broken mirror, you're never going to get a normal image from it. We need more than just to try harder. We need someone who can fix us. And that's like the story of the Bible, of why Jesus had to come in the first place. And my purpose with saying that He is the power of how we live out our purpose, like Jesus is our power, is we can't just stop at say that Jesus was our example. Jesus is our example, but He's more than that. He is our example in the sense that He is the only one who perfectly loved God and people. Right. He's the only one who lived out God's law and purpose for life. But He went further than that. He laid down His life and He rose again so that we could be restored, and then not through our own strength, not through works, but by grace through faith, we can have true life, both now and forever, through Jesus working in us, kind of that Galatians 2:20 of it's not me that lives, but it's now Christ who lives in me, and He's the one that gives us power to do it.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the, if you read the definition of love in 1 Corinthians 13, it's impossible to do in our own power, because love is patient, love is kind. We can have acts of patience and acts of kindness that it's impossible to live patient and live kind. And he goes on to say, love, does not envy. It's impossible for us to walk through life and never envy in our own power. But that's why to fulfill our purpose, to live the life God's called us to do, we have to rely on the Spirit of God to give us the strength to do it. We can never work harder, try harder, be better, to the point where we truly fulfill our purpose. Because even it's just that example of turning over a new leaf. You can change some things you do, but very few times is that change a life change. It's maybe you do it for a little while or you change, but changing your whole life, every aspect of your life, can only be done by Christ.
Yeah, well, and even further into that, this idea of the reason why we have a deeper problem is, what if we do all the right things, but our motives behind them are bad too? And that's like, where the Bible talks about our heart and why, we have a heart of stone that needs to be replaced with a heart of flesh.
And I think that's important, just to go back to something we talk about a lot. All pastors talk about a lot, teachers, is that we can't ever put the cart before the horse when it comes to grace and works, because we are saved by grace. If we ever try to put the works of Christ before the grace of Christ, we're going to find ourselves empty. Because yes, works follow grace. You are not saved, by works, but to works. We are his workmanship created in Christ Jesus unto good works. But before we can serve God and do it, we have to be recipients of the grace of God. And so that's what I just want to make sure, because sometimes when you preach, we like that mentality of, okay, what I need to do, Pastor, tell me 1, 2, 3, what steps I need to make my life better. And you tell them what you first need to do is rest in Jesus. I mean, that's hard. I mean, you're telling me the first step I need to do is just rest? Yes. You need to rest in Jesus, because it's not about working, it's about trusting. And once you trust and you receive Christ in repentance and faith, he will then give you the strength to do the works you need to do to live a life that's fulfilling your purpose. One more thing real quick before we go to break, because we're going to go to break here in just a second. Your third point talked about how there's a prowling lion who's trying to steal, kill, and destroy. And so we know that's Satan. So expound kind of on that, about why do you think this imagery of a prowling lion, that's an intense imagery. It's, you look at a prowling lion and it's not a gentle imagery, So why do you think this imagery that Peter used is important to... He used it in 1 Peter. We actually had connect groups over that, so that's why I'm thinking Peter. Yeah. But why do you think that imagery is important to help us with this topic?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's like you said, that's how Peter describes it. Like, that's how he describes our enemy that is prowling around, waiting for the right time to devour us. And I think that prowling really helps us think about it, because I think sometimes we get confused and we think that Satan's attacks are only going to be right in our face, where we can see them, and going to be where we are even aware of them. But a prowling lion doesn't always make himself known. Sometimes the prowling part of that is the stealthy moving around, sneaking behind you, not even realizing he's there until it's too late. And that's why Peter's call is to be sober-minded, be alert, be looking around as if there's lions all around you. And I don't think we have to over-exaggerate it, but we have to take it seriously we live... Because there's a difference. If you walked around, if someone told you there's a lion loose in your neighborhood, you would be looking around.
You're not letting your kids go outside.
And then if you did, you would be extra careful. You'd be like, okay, we'll just drive down. We don't need to walk.
I have a few guns on me at all times.
You would be alert. Yeah. You would be sober-minded. But I guess I think maybe that's part of the problem, is we don't have lions walking around that we can point to and say, hey. We don't have that example where we have to be aware of it.
Yeah, that's we talked about that in our Connect group yesterday, because our Connect group lesson was actually over 1 Peter 5, so it's funny how the Lord, again, always just coordinates these things. But, we have cats at home, and you just watch how they just sit and they wait, even if it's just a fly flying around. They just sit until the fly flies right in front of them, and they can pounce on it. And I think that imagery, I always just think of the National Geographic imagery of that lion in the tall grass, crouched down, the zebra or whatever, just drinking water, not having a clue what's going on, thinking everything in the world's fine. And that's why the Lord uses that imagery, because Satan is not just attacking us where it's obvious. He is watching, he is patient, he is waiting, and he's looking for those times we're not ready, we're not expecting, where he can pounce on us, and there's nothing we can do about it. Yeah. So I think that's a great, and that's one thing the devil does. He looks at those things in life that we're drawn to, whether it's relationships or whether it's our careers. Hey, I can get them here. I can pounce them, make them think this is their purpose, and I can get in that door, and they'll live their life for love of a boy or a girl. They'll live their life for money or fame or careers, and we sometimes think it's literal death, you think seeking whom he may devour, but devour could simply just be a slow life of making you waste your life for things that don't matter. That is devouring your soul. And so, yeah, great illustration, and we need to be alert, be aware. And we're going to hit one more question when we come back that kind of builds up on this, the devil, the prowling lion, and how he distracts us from things. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. We're going to pick up where we left off just a minute ago. We were talking about how Satan's, Peter, compares him to a prowling lion. And one thing about a prowling lion, and again, I'm maybe a nerd, I don't know, but a lot of these reels pop up on my phone about wildlife hunting and all that type of stuff. And a lot of times the prey they are hunting is often distracted by something. And so, for example, the zebra's drinking water, or, something else is going on, and they wait to pounce, so their head's down, they're distracted by something else, they're looking somewhere else. And so they kind of led you to another part of this point yesterday when you were talking about how one of the ways the devil devours is by distraction. And so what are some even good things, like our hobbies and rest? What are things the devil uses that aren't innate sinful, so they trick us? Because it's not sinful to have a hobby. It's not sinful to rest. So what are some of those things he tricks us that we think's okay, but he's actually using it to distract us?
Yeah, and there's so many things. I love how you put it. Oh, they're not necessarily bad things. Just make that clear of like, these can be God, like glorifying things. These can be good things, maybe even blessings in our lives that like, bring us like happiness, bring us joy. But when we place them in the place of God or in excess, that's when it becomes a problem. And I think one of the biggest ones is just like entertainment. Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with movies or TV or cell phones in and of themselves. I think they're all tools that can be really helpful. And there's even ways like to use TV, movies to connect with people, to point people to the gospel. There's ways to do that. But like one thing that was like challenging and even convicting for me is that we live in a culture where, it's normal to binge entire seasons of TV in one sitting.
Guilty.
And that's what I said during the sermon. I went on this long list of binging TV series in one sitting, watching content on your TV, and then when it's on break, you pull out your phone and watch content. And I said some other things, and I'm like, these are things that I struggle with. These are things that are like, because we're in a culture of distraction, because our culture says you need to be entertained every second of every day, we buy into that. And to put it bluntly, we end up wasting our life and wasting our purpose. It's not like, because again, it's not like we're using these things to really love God and love people. Can they be? I think they can. I think we can use these things in a way that pushes us towards love for God and love for people. But I think a lot of times Satan doesn't want to make us suffer or make us tempted with even other things. He wants to just keep us distracted. Yeah. He wants us to just stay in this coma, and so that we're less effective for Jesus.
Man, that's a great way to summarize that, because I think we believe that the devil wants us all to be like, we envision the term wicked people running around with like wands and pitchforks, looking like the devil, dressing in black and all but really the devil does not care how close you are to looking the part, as long as you're not the part. And so if something good is keeping you from what's best, the devil doesn't care if you sell your life out to hunting, or sell your life out to fishing, or sell your life out to entertainment or sports. He has no care in the world about that, because his purpose is to keep you from selling your life out to Jesus. And as long as you're not identifying your purpose as loving God and loving people, he'll take all these good things. Now, if you're loving God and loving people, you can place these good things where they need to be, and they can add value to your life. I mean, I love watching good TV shows.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that there's days I feel guilty when I sit down to watch TV at night and I realize that I'm going to be watching more TV than I read or I did anything else. And so, yes, but as long as, I have this phrase I say all the time. It's one of those phrases I say is that good things become bad things when they're elevated above the main thing. And that's what we're talking about right here, is that the devil can use good things, but he'll make them bad things because we'll elevate the good things above the main thing, which is Jesus. And I'll just add a couple on there that we talk about, like hobbies is a big one. And this is a touchy subject, and, people might not like this when I say it, but it is what it is. Because I do understand you don't have to go to church to be a Christian, right? You don't have to be here every time the doors are open, but like we always say, you have to go to church to be an obedient Christian, because the Bible says, do not forsake the assembling of yourselves together. But one thing I see in our culture is because church is every week and things like that, then we start to get in this habit of, if church butts up against a school event wins. If church butts up against a sporting events win. If church butts up against an academic event or a family hobby, or even if church butts up against a headache or something like that, and we are breeding this mentality into our kids that, hey, if it's ever church or, it's okay, church will always be there, it's the or. And our kids begin to prioritize what we prioritize. And so the devil can take all of those things, and we might not even realize it, but talking to parents now, we may not even realize it, but when we prioritize those good things above the main thing, our kids notice. And I can't tell you how many times parents have come to me as a pastor and say, I just wish my kids were sold out to church. Well, a lot of times their kids come to church maybe once every 6 weeks or every once in a while. They're not anti-church. They're just not committed. And sometimes, not every time, that goes back to, as a child, church kind of took that back seat to anything else. And so in their lives, it does that in their parenting. Yeah, we'll be there. There's absolutely nothing to do on a Sunday. And so we have to be careful that we're not allowing the devil to distract us. I know that was kind of a long rant, but I think it's important for us to know that even those things, you might not think you're choosing them over God, but if every time the decision came up to hang out with my wife or to go play golf, and I always chose golf, my wife's going to eventually be like, is golf more important to you than me? And the same thing is true. Every time the decision comes between go be with God's people or go be somewhere else, we choose to be somewhere else. Our actions are proof of our heart.
Yeah. Well, and I think this gets back into Jesus' call to love God in everything that we do. Again, we've already made clear, we're not saying anything bad about, sports or having your kids involved in those things. But loving God even in those aspects. And maybe there is times where you have to say no to certain things so that you can keep your priority right of loving God completely and fully. And I think that's something we all have to check our hearts with constantly of and go back to, am I getting to the point where I'm loving this more than God? Am I using this to glorify God, or am I letting it rule my life in a way that it should never?
And exactly, I think a good way we can tie this in is going back to the Prowling Lion. Church, being a part, I say the term church because we know what it means, but we'll change it to being around God's people is vital for your spiritual health, because what animal is the lion going to attack? The one that's in the middle of the pack, or the one that's got distracted and is behind by 25, 30 yards and kind of isolated out there by themselves? The devil's not going to attack the one in the pack, or the lion's not going to attack the one in the pack. He's going to attack the one that's isolated. And so there's strength in numbers, and the same thing is true in our spiritual life. One thing the devil does is distract us, gets us away from the pack, gets us away from God's people, and we're so much easier to pick off when we're out by ourselves, being isolated, and don't have that strength of the pack with us.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then you might not even know you have a problem with something. Like, you might not know something is distracting you from God. And that's where, the cliche things of spending time with God and spending time with His people, like both of those things of being in the Word and being in prayer, that challenges you so that you're not having, constantly testing you and seeing where you can see the flaws and the things that you're putting above God. But also when you're around God's people. When you're around God's people, then that's that accountability, that carrying each other's burdens.
Edifying, building each other up. And so I think one way he distracts, he uses things to get us off our purpose. But one thing he does is get us away from God's people, which then helps us be distracted more from our purpose. But again, I want to clarify one more time, because I know these things aren't bad things, but we just got to always, be sober-minded, be alert that we're not letting good things become elevated over our purpose, which is loving God and loving people.
Yeah. Well, and I think, let's put it bluntly, you could be a specific situation, but if all you ever did was read the Bible, then that's all you ever did. And then to the neglect of applying it, to the neglect of loving your family, to the neglect of loving those around you, then you took a good thing, something that is necessary for a good life of reading God's Word, and then you stripped it of its actual worth and value because you failed to apply it, and you failed to love God and love your neighbor. Yeah.
And that's the thing. I mean, you can't just be head knowledge. It's got to be head knowledge that becomes heart knowledge, which becomes practical application. But man, great word yesterday. Anything else you want to say before we wrap this up?
No, I mean, my main challenge would just be ask that question. What is life all about? Don't settle for what the world tells us is our purpose, but seek the one who made us, who created us, who knows our purpose because he gave us the purpose in the first place. And that'll change your life. And I think no matter how old you are, like you already mentioned, no matter how old you are, you have the entire rest of your life ahead of you. And so, even if you feel like you wasted your life so far, don't let that stop you from living the rest of your life for the purpose that God has put on your life.
Yeah, I'll just jump on that and say, nothing will fulfill you apart from Christ.
Amen.
Don't buy the lies of the world. Your career, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, money, fame, fortune, hobbies will all leave you empty, but Jesus is the only thing you get more fulfilled with the longer you walk with him, the closer you get to leaving this world than anything else. So live for your purpose, love God, love people, and you will feel that fulfillment. Well, thank you, brother. That was a great message, great time to talk about it. Next week, we jump back into the book of Luke. I'm back in the pulpit this week, so we're going to be looking in Luke chapter 4, and you don't want to miss it. You never want to miss it, but anything goes on, any preacher you never want to miss. But we're looking at Jesus, how he started his public ministry in Luke chapter 4 with a passage, and all I'm going to say is, I can promise you probably don't know where we're going with it. And it's that passage of Luke chapter 4, beginning in verse 14, when Jesus takes the scroll of Isaiah and he reads something. And I'm not telling you all, you can go Luke chapter 4, verse 14 through 30, start there. And we're going to dive into that passage. And I promise you there'll be some truths, because I'm a pastor, I've read that passage 40 times, and I've already seen some new truths in my study this week that I think will be challenging, but also encouraging to us.
So it sounds like you got to be there.
You got to be there. I'm not telling you anymore. So this Sunday, we hope to see, it's Mother's Day, so come sit with your mother, or if your mother's in town, bring her with you. We're going to have a gift for the mothers. We're going to recognize the mothers, pray for them, and we're going to have a great time around God's Word. Hey, have a great weekend, and we will see you in a couple days.